The Valorians were once a proud race. For centuries, they had ruled a vast region of the galaxy. Their starships were fast, their weapons strong, and their armies feared by many. But all of that pride was slowly breaking apart. A new enemy had arrived, one that did not talk, did not reason, and did not stop. The enemy called itself nothing. Other races gave it a name, the Kythera swarm. The Kythera were not like any normal foe. They did not build cities. They did not sign peace. They were countless, endless, and hungry. They came in waves of living machines and strange, twisted creatures. Every world they touched was stripped to dust. Every army that faced them was torn apart. Against such an enemy, even the proud Valorians began to fall. At first, the Valorians fought with honor. They sent fleets, battalions, and warlords. But the swarm never stopped. For every one they killed, 10 more appeared. For every ship destroyed, new ships rose from the dark. The Valorians tried strategy. They tried new weapons. They tried sacrifice. Nothing worked. One by one, their colonies burned. Their sky cities fell. Their people cried out for salvation. Desperate, the Valorian High Council made a choice that broke their pride. They sent a signal, not to allies, because none were left, but to the stars themselves. A call for help. A desperate plea. They sent the same message on every frequency, in every language they knew. To any who hear this, we are dying. Our people are falling. The Kythera swarm will consume us all. Please, help us. They waited. Days passed. Then weeks. Some council members lost hope. Others whispered that no one would come. Perhaps no one even listened. But then, one evening, a reply arrived. The signal was weak, small, almost fragile. It came from a world far outside the great empires. The message was simple. A voice spoke in plain words. This is Earth. We received your call. Help is on the way. The council was silent. Earth. None of them had heard of such a world. It was not in their maps. It was not a name that carried weight in the galaxy. Some thought the signal was a joke, or perhaps a cruel trick. But the data was real. A ship was coming. The Valorians prepared to welcome powerful allies. They imagined vast fleets with shining weapons. They imagined godlike warriors who would crush the Kythera with ease. Their people whispered in hope. Children prayed. Soldiers lifted their heads. Salvation, at last, was near. Weeks later, the human ship arrived. It was not what the Valorians expected. Instead of a mighty fleet, there was only one small vessel. Its hull was patched and worn, not sleek or advanced. Instead of thousands of warriors, only a handful of humans stepped out. They were small compared to Valorians, their bodies fragile, their skin soft, their faces almost gentle. The council stared in disbelief. Was this a joke? Was this their help? One Valorian commander growled. We asked for saviors, and they send us this? Another sneered. These creatures will not last a single hour against the swarm. But the humans did not seem insulted. They did not seem afraid. Their leader, a man with calm eyes, only smiled. We heard you needed help, he said. His voice was steady, almost casual, as if he were speaking of something small, not the end of a world. The Valorians studied these humans. Their weapons looked simple, nothing special. Their armor was light, nothing compared to Valorian battlesuits. Their ship carried no great cannons, no powerful shields. Everything about them screamed weakness. And yet, something about them was unsettling. The way they moved. The way they watched. The way they stood in silence, as if they had already been here before. As if this war was nothing new to them. The Valorian High Council argued deep into the night. Some demanded the humans be sent away. Others said any help was better than none. In the end, desperation won. The humans would fight alongside them. That night, as the alien stars burned above, the humans sat together, calm and quiet. The Valorians could not hear their low voices, but one line was caught by a translator. A human whispered to his commander, "They have no idea what they've invited." The commander only nodded. His eyes were sharp, almost cold. He looked up at the alien sky, then said softly, "Don't worry. We've dealt with worse." The next day, the humans marched into the war. The Valorians still doubted them, still saw them as fragile creatures. But deep inside, a strange feeling was beginning to grow, something between curiosity and fear. They had begged for help. They had prayed for salvation. But what had come was not what they imagined. Something had arrived from Earth. And the galaxy would soon learn that sometimes salvation can look a lot like something far worse. The Valorians were still not sure what to make of the humans. When the small group stepped off their ship, the great hall fell silent. The Valorian soldiers, tall and armored, looked down at these strange visitors. Their bodies seemed weak, their skin pale and soft, their eyes almost too small. Many whispered that this was a mistake. These creatures could not stand against the Kythera swarm. But the humans did not look nervous. They carried themselves with a strange calm, as if nothing around them was new. The Valorians expected fear, yet they saw steady faces, relaxed postures, and even quiet smiles. It made the warriors uneasy. The human leader introduced himself. His name was Captain Elias Ward. His voice was deep but simple, his words direct. He did not boast of power. He did not promise miracles. He only said, "We heard your call. We are here to fight." The council chamber buzzed with confusion. This was not what they wanted to hear. They wanted assurances, promises of great weapons and unstoppable fleets. Instead, they were given a handful of soldiers with nothing but strange rifles and light armor. One Valorian general could not stay silent. He stepped forward, towering over the humans, his armor shining in the chamber light. "This is a war that has crushed empires," he said. "You are too small, too weak. You cannot fight what we face." But Elias only looked up at him, calm as ever, and answered, "We will see." His words carried no arrogance, no anger, but something in his tone silenced the hall. It was not what he said, but how he said it. The Valorians decided to test the humans. They sent them to a military outpost near the front lines. It was a ruined base, scarred by battle, filled with the smell of smoke and burnt metal. The Kythera had attacked there many times, and the soldiers were close to breaking. The humans walked among them, studying the damage. They did not look impressed or afraid. One of the Valorian captains asked, "Do you understand what you are about to face?" A human soldier, a woman with sharp eyes, only replied, "We've seen worse." The Valorians grew more frustrated. How could these fragile beings act so calm? Did they not understand the terror of the swarm? The Kythera were nightmares, endless and merciless. No other race had ever stood against them for long. But the humans did not flinch. They asked questions about supply routes, weak points, terrain. They took notes. They made small jokes with each other, even laughed. To the Valorians, this behavior was madness. To the humans, it was normal. When the first attack came, the Valorians expected the humans to run. The sky darkened as the swarm ships poured down, and the ground shook with the roar of alien engines. Soldiers grabbed their weapons, shouting orders, hearts pounding in fear. But the humans did not panic. They moved with precision, calm and steady. They took positions, gave commands to each other in sharp, clear voices. The Valorians watched with disbelief. The Kythera hit hard, waves of crawling machines and winged beasts charging across the battlefield. The Valorian lines trembled. Some began to fall back. But then, the humans opened fire. Their rifles spat fire in controlled bursts. Their aim was sharp, every shot placed with purpose. They did not waste bullets. They did not scream. They fought like they had done this 1,000 times before. When the enemy broke through the first barricade, most Valorians pulled back in fear. But the humans advanced. They set traps, detonated explosives, and used fire to push the swarm back. One soldier was struck and fell, bleeding badly. But even as medics carried him away, he shouted orders, his face twisted in pain but his voice strong. The Valorians had never seen such refusal to stop. To them, a wounded warrior was useless. To humans, even the dying fought on. Hours passed. The battle ended with the swarm retreating, at least for now. The Valorians stared at the humans in shock. They had held the line. Not only held it, but pushed the enemy back farther than the Valorians had ever managed. The alien soldiers whispered among themselves, confused and unsettled. How could such small, weak beings do this? Later that night, the Valorian commander met Captain Elias. He asked him the question everyone was thinking. Why do your people fight like this? You do not fear death. Elias gave a faint smile. We fear it, he said, but we do not stop because of it. We have been fighting each other for longer than you can imagine. We know war better than most. We know what it takes to survive. The commander stared at him, disturbed by the quiet certainty in his voice. These humans were not the saviors he had expected. They were something else. Something colder. Something darker. The Valorians began to realize a truth that unsettled them. They had asked for help, but what they had found might not be allies at all. They had found a force unlike anything in the galaxy. They had found humanity. And humanity was not here to comfort them. Humanity was here to fight. The dawn came with smoke in the sky and silence in the air. The Valorians had warned the humans that the Kythera swarm would return soon, and they were right. The humans spent the night preparing traps, setting explosives in hidden corners, and mapping out positions with careful detail. The Valorians had never seen such strange methods before. They were used to direct battles, lines of soldiers, and formal strategy. But the humans seemed to prefer chaos, turning the broken ruins into a hunting ground. Some Valorian officers shook their heads, believing this would never work. Yet the humans carried on, calm and focused, as if they had done this many times before. When the first scream of the swarm engines filled the sky, the Valorian soldiers felt their blood run cold. Black clouds of Kythera drones poured down, their wings like knives, their bodies glistening with steel and flesh. The ground began to shake as heavier creatures crawled from the horizon, massive beasts covered in armor, their many legs tearing into the soil. The Valorians tightened their lines, shields raised, weapons primed, but already their hands trembled. The swarm was endless, a living storm that devoured everything in its path. The humans, however, only adjusted their rifles and nodded to one another. They looked almost bored, as though this was not an alien horror but another day of work. When the swarm struck, it was like a wave crashing against a shore. The Valorian lines broke almost at once, soldiers screaming as they were pulled down by claws and blades. Chaos filled the battlefield. But then the humans moved. Their formation was small, almost laughably small compared to the endless flood, yet it did not bend or scatter. They fired in bursts, each shot precise, every movement efficient. One human threw a small device that exploded into a wall of fire, cutting off a section of the swarm. Another used wires and hooks to pull heavy rubble down, crushing a cluster of attackers. The Valorians watched with disbelief. The humans were not stronger, not faster, not better armed, and yet they fought with a kind of madness that no other species would dare. They did not wait for the swarm to overwhelm them. They pushed forward into the chaos, shooting, stabbing, setting off explosives in close quarters. Their eyes were cold, their voices steady, their movements filled with a terrifying confidence. The Valorians could not understand it. How could such fragile bodies walk straight into the jaws of death and act as if it was nothing? A massive beast broke through the barricade, its body like a mountain of claws and teeth. The Valorian soldiers turned to run, but the humans did not. Two of them sprinted forward, dragging explosives behind them. They shouted a signal, their voices steady even in the face of the monster. Then fire and thunder filled the air. The beast collapsed, burning, as the humans rolled back to cover. The Valorians stood frozen. They would never have done such a thing. No sane being would. But the humans had, and they had lived. As the battle raged, the Valorians noticed something even more unsettling. The humans smiled. Not always, not with joy, but with something colder, sharper. Some laughed in short bursts as they cut through the enemy, as though the danger excited them. Others showed teeth in grim smiles as if the fight gave them life. To the Valorians, the swarm was terror. To the humans, it was a challenge. Hours passed. The battlefield was drenched in blood and smoke. The swarm had taken heavy losses, more than the Valorians had ever seen before. But it was not because of them. It was because of the humans. These strange, fragile creatures had stood where no one else could, and they had pushed the swarm back. When the fighting finally slowed, when the sky cleared and the silence returned, the Valorian survivors gathered in disbelief. Their people had been broken for so long, beaten again and again by the endless enemy. Yet here stood a handful of humans, breathing heavily, bruised and bleeding, but alive and unafraid. The Valorian commander approached Captain Elias. His voice shook when he spoke. "How do you do this? How do you fight them as if death does not matter?" Elias looked at him, his face tired but his eyes sharp, and he answered with quiet words. "Because we know what death is. We've lived with it. We've made peace with it. That is why it doesn't stop us." The commander could not reply. There was nothing to say. In that moment, the Valorians realized the truth. These humans were not like them. They were not like anyone. They were something else. They were creatures that refused to die, creatures that turned fear into fuel, creatures that saw the impossible and still walked forward. The Valorians had begged for help. What they had received was far darker, far stranger, and far more dangerous. They had received humanity. The Valorians could not understand what they had seen in the battle. Their minds struggled to accept the image of fragile humans holding back the Kythera swarm with such ruthless efficiency. After the fight, when the ruins were quiet and the smoke drifted away, the Valorian commanders gathered to speak. Many were shaken. They whispered to each other that these humans were not normal, that something inside them was twisted, something far more dangerous than weapons or armor. They had watched the humans laugh while bleeding, fight while broken, and stand when any other race would have fallen. For the Valorians, war was duty and honor, but for the humans it seemed to be something deeper, something carved into their very bones. When Captain Elias and his squad entered the chamber to report, all eyes turned to them. Elias spoke simply, giving details of positions, tactics, and results. He did not brag. He did not demand thanks. His calm voice spoke as if the impossible victory was just another day. The council sat in silence, disturbed by the cold normality of his words. Finally, one elder asked the question no one else dared. "Why do you not fear them? The swarm breaks worlds. The swarm consumes empires. Yet you fight them as if they are nothing. How is this possible?" Elias paused for a long moment. Then he answered, his tone sharp but controlled. "Because fear doesn't stop us. It drives us. On Earth, we fought not only enemies from beyond, but ourselves. For thousands of years, we made war on our own kind. We destroyed each other with fire, with steel, with weapons that could end cities in a single strike. And yet we survived. We always survived. Do you understand? War is not new to us. War made us what we are." The Valorians shuddered at his words. They could not imagine turning their weapons against their own people for so long. To them, unity was survival. To humans, conflict was survival. One Valorian general leaned forward, his voice uneasy. "You mean you killed your own kind for centuries? And you grew stronger from it?" Elias nodded without hesitation. "Yes. We learned how to fight by fighting ourselves. We learned how to endure by enduring the worst of our own making. Pain made us clever. Loss made us stronger. And death taught us how to live without fear of it." The room fell silent. The Valorians felt a strange chill crawl through them. These humans were not just survivors. They were forged in violence, shaped by endless conflict. No wonder they walked into battle without hesitation. No wonder they treated the swarm as just another enemy. For them, this was nothing new. Later that night, a Valerian officer spoke privately to one of the human soldiers, a woman named Sarah Kane. He asked her why she smiled in battle. She cleaned her weapon calmly, then said, "Because if you don't laugh, you break. Fear eats you alive if you let it. We laugh because it's the only way to stay human when the world turns into hell." Her words disturbed him more than screams would have. The Valorians began to see a pattern. The human mindset was their true weapon. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. Their ships were weak, their armor thin, their numbers small. But their minds were unshakable. Where other races saw despair, humans saw a challenge. Where others surrendered, humans resisted. Where others broke, humans adapted. They turned pain into fuel, fear into courage, and chaos into opportunity. During the next battles, this truth became undeniable. The swarm came again and again, but every time the humans turned the tide with unpredictable tricks. They set traps in places no one would expect. They sacrificed ground only to strike harder when the enemy followed. They used fire, noise, explosives, even their own bodies as weapons. Nothing was too brutal. Nothing was too desperate. The Valorians realized with horror that humans did not just fight battles. They played with them. They twisted every rule of war into something savage and effective. And in every fight, they did not simply try to win. They tried to make the enemy suffer. By the end of one brutal night, when the swarm had been driven back once again, the Valerian soldiers stood in awe and fear of their new allies. One whispered, "They are not like us. They are not like anyone. They fight like demons." The words spread, and many began to believe them. The humans had become more than soldiers in their eyes. They had become something darker, something primal, something unstoppable. The Valorians had begged for help, but the truth was now clear. Humanity was not salvation. Humanity was the storm that followed. The Valorians had begun to see the humans in a different light. At first they were doubted, then feared, but now something even deeper was growing among the council: unease. The victories were real, the swarm had been beaten back again and again, but the methods of the humans disturbed everyone who watched them. After each battle, the humans would gather their weapons, laugh with each other, and treat the chaos as if it were routine. To the Valorians, this was madness. How could anyone see endless slaughter and act so calm, almost comfortable? Questions began to rise in the high council chambers. What kind of species could fight like this? What had shaped them into such beings? To answer these questions, the Valorians searched the archives of Earth, digging into transmissions, data fragments, and scattered records. What they found chilled them to the core. Unlike most species, humanity's history was not filled with stories of unity and peace. It was a record of war after war, blood upon blood, nations fighting nations, tribes killing tribes, entire civilizations rising and collapsing in fire. For thousands of years humans had turned their blades upon each other. The Valorians read of world wars, of weapons that could turn cities into ash clouds, of genocides and endless conflicts that spanned continents. It was a history of violence so deep that it made the swarm look almost familiar. The council could not believe it. How had they survived such destruction? How had they not burned their world to dust? But they had survived, and worse, they had grown stronger because of it. When the Valerian generals confronted Captain Elias about this, expecting denial, he did not even flinch. He admitted it openly. "Yes," he said, "we have killed more of ourselves than any enemy ever has. That is why nothing in this galaxy frightens us. We already lived through our own hell." His words struck like a blade. The Valorians realized that the humans did not come to them as saviors but as survivors of horrors greater than any alien swarm. To the humans, the Kythera were not monsters. They were simply another enemy on a long list of enemies. Later, during a council meeting, one elder whispered to another, "Do you not see? These humans have become what they are because they are forged in endless blood. They are not warriors by choice. They are warriors by nature. In the following battles, the Valorians paid closer attention. They noticed details they had ignored before. The humans did not merely kill to survive, they studied their enemies, adapted, and then used every weakness in merciless fashion. They would set traps knowing it would lead to screams. They would wound creatures not to finish them but to draw in others, creating panic. They would fight with an efficiency that felt less like defense and more like a predator enjoying the hunt. The Valorians began to feel that the swarm was not the only horror on the battlefield. The humans were their allies, but they were also something that unsettled the very soul. One soldier described it best after seeing a human stand over a burning swarm beast with a grin. The Kythera are a nightmare, but these humans, they are the monster's nightmares fear. The Valorian people, once full of hope that salvation had come, began to whisper among themselves. Children asked their parents if the humans would leave after the war, or if they would stay. Some elders warned that inviting such a race into their world might be a greater danger than the swarm itself. Yet no one could deny the truth. They were winning, and they were only winning because of the humans. Humanity's darkness was now their greatest shield. But it was also a shadow that frightened them more with every passing day. When Elias addressed the council again, he left them with words that echoed long after he departed. You called us to save you. You should remember this. We do not fight to save. We fight because we refuse to lose. That is what makes us human. The Valorians sat in silence, realizing the cost of their choice. They had begged the stars for salvation, but what had answered was something far more dangerous. They had called for help, and the darkness of humanity had come. The war had dragged on for weeks, and each battle was worse than the last. The Kythera swarm adapted quickly, sending larger beasts, sharper claws, and new formations that pressed harder against the broken defenses of the Valorians. Even with human help, the outposts were crumbling one by one. The Valorians felt despair creeping back, whispering that even with these strange allies, their end was still coming. But the humans did not break. Where the Valorians saw disaster, the humans saw opportunity. Captain Elias and his squad studied every failure and turned it into a lesson. They set new traps, changed positions, and prepared the battlefield in ways no Valorian mind would dare imagine. To the humans, losing ground was not defeat, it was bait. To the Valorians, this way of thinking was madness, but they had no choice except to follow. The next great assault came with a fury that shook the very stars. The swarm descended in numbers beyond counting, black shapes blotting out the sky, machines and beasts screaming as they poured across the land. The Valorians panicked, their lines faltering almost instantly, but the humans did not retreat. Elias barked orders, calm and sharp, and his soldiers moved with deadly rhythm. Explosives hidden in tunnels ripped through enemy clusters, collapsing entire streets on top of them. Fire traps lit the ground, forcing the swarm into narrow alleys where human rifles tore them apart. Even as the Valorians screamed in fear, the humans laughed in the smoke, their voices carrying like ghosts. The tide seemed endless, but the humans did not see endless waves, they saw patterns. They noticed how the swarm shifted, where it hesitated, how it reacted to noise, light, and blood. Every small detail became a weapon. They turned the battlefield into a puzzle, and solved it with brutality. Then came the moment that changed everything. The swarm unleashed its greatest horror yet, a beast larger than any Valorian city tower, armored in steel and bone, with claws like ships and eyes that burned like fire. It roared, and the earth itself seemed to shatter. The Valorians broke instantly, their courage fleeing, but the humans stood still. Elias stared at the monster, as if he had seen it before, as if it was only another obstacle. That thing bleeds, he said calmly, and his squad prepared without hesitation. What followed was madness. The humans ran straight toward the giant. They planted charges on its legs, scaled its armor with hooks, and threw fire into its open wounds. One soldier was crushed, another burned, but still they climbed, still they struck. The Valorians could only watch in horror as the fragile creatures tore into the beast like ants on a giant predator. Finally, With one thunderous blast, the monster fell, shaking the ground as its body collapsed. The swarm froze in confusion. For the first time, they hesitated. And that hesitation was all the humans needed. Elias shouted the order, and the humans unleashed chaos. Explosives erupted in every corner, firestorms roared through the streets, and hidden traps detonated one after another. The swarm panicked, creatures crashing into each other, tearing themselves apart in the frenzy. The humans pressed forward, merciless, striking with blades, fire, and bullets until the tide broke and the swarm retreated. The Valorians could not believe what they had seen. The humans had turned despair into victory, had taken the impossible and made it possible. But the victory was not what unsettled them most. It was how the humans achieved it. Not through strength, not through numbers, but through sheer madness and creativity. They fought like no other species could, using anything and everything as a weapon, ignoring fear, ignoring pain, and embracing chaos as if it was their natural element. When the battle ended, the Valorians stood in silence, their hearts filled not only with relief but with dread. They looked at the humans, bloodied, laughing, and still eager for the next fight, and they wondered if they had unleashed something they could never control. The turning point had come, not just in the war, but in the minds of the Valorians. They no longer asked if humanity could save them. They now asked if humanity was more terrifying than the swarm itself. The battlefield was quiet at last. Smoke rose from the broken ground, the air thick with ash and the stench of blood. The Kythera swarm was gone, driven back into the void with losses they had never suffered before. The Valorians staggered among the ruins, their eyes wide, their voices weak, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. For generations they had fought and lost against the swarm, but now, for the first time, the enemy had retreated. And it was not because of Valorian strength, or their proud fleets, or their weapons. It was because of the humans. The handful of fragile creatures stood among the wreckage, wounded, bloodied, but smiling as if the war was nothing more than another challenge won. To the Valorians it was salvation, yet it did not feel like victory. It felt like something far darker had been unleashed. In the days that followed, the Valorian High Council met in secret chambers. They spoke not of celebration, but of fear. Reports described the humans with words that unsettled every ear: relentless, merciless, cunning, fearless. Soldiers whispered that the humans were not allies but predators who had simply chosen the swarm as prey. One commander confessed he had feared the Kythera his whole life, but now he feared the humans more. And still the humans themselves seemed unchanged. Captain Elias gave no speeches, no promises, no vows of peace. He simply spoke of rebuilding defenses, preparing for the next war, and moving forward. His calm tone made the Valorians uneasy. To them the war was a nightmare, but to him it was routine. Children of the Valorian cities began to whisper stories at night. They called the humans demons wrapped in soft skin, saviors who fought with the rage of monsters. Parents hushed them, but the truth was clear in every eye. Humanity had saved them, but not in the way they had imagined. The Valorians had begged for angels, but devils had come instead. Rumors spread of human history, of endless wars and countless dead left in their wake. The more the Valorians learned, the more their gratitude twisted into fear. Some even asked if they had made a mistake calling for help at all. Yet there was no denying the reality. The swarm was broken, their worlds were safe, and humanity had done what no other could. When Elias stood before the council for the last time, he left them with words they would never forget. "You asked for salvation," he said quietly, his eyes sharp and cold. "But salvation is not what we are. We are survivors. We do not come to bring peace. We come to endure, to fight, and to win. That is humanity." With that he and his soldiers returned to their ship, leaving silence behind. The Valorians watched them go, relief mixing with dread. For though they had survived, they now knew something terrible. Humanity was not just another race among the stars. Humanity was different. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was survival itself. And as the human ship vanished into the darkness of space, a final thought haunted the Valorian leaders. The Kythera swarm might return one day, stronger than before, but now a greater question hung heavy in their minds. When that day came, would the humans still fight beside them, or would they stand against them? The galaxy had seen the truth, and the truth was simple. They had begged humanity for help, and humanity had answered. But what had come was far worse than anything they had imagined.